bellowing through the itsy pastures, past the Evermore and the dry smoke, and dashed and smothered in crumbly-rumbly moss vampires, fell the little town of Sovery. It was 9 p.m. when I stumbled against it after months of treasure hunting across the counties. It had been an excellent trip until this very morning, having tripped and dropped 6 months' worth of trinkets into a hunk of moss. That damned moss! It had swallowed my pieces into a peat bog, and despite multiple dives, I lost almost all of them. I looked at the few rubbish trinkets I had managed to salvage, then up at Sovery's one tavern. If anywhere could carry my enormous pity, frame and sagging trinket sack, it would be here. Into the inn I went. I managed a small table in the corner and sipped a red. By shepherd's luck, I'd arrived in time for supper. The inn was deeply orange. Each corner of the floor rug spelt a different colour of drink, and perhaps 11 locals were hunched chatting. I must have licked my finger to turn the page of the menu 1,000 times before I realised it was laminated. Hunger ate. I brought a bronze medallion from my bag and left it by my menu for a curious waiter to see. When one came over, he just said, "If you're thinking about paying with that dog biscuit, I'd advise you not to try. You couldn't sell me that for a half-hour bath." Christ, 1,000,000 miles of trudging, and I had almost nothing to show for it. Those metal dog biscuits, and perhaps a fiver, was all I had to my name. The waiter waited. I looked out at the green world I had just come from. Heaps of wet moss were picking up in the wind, floating like sea foam on the lossy-mouthed banks, thudding the windows of the tavern, and casting scary shadows on the floor. If not a good meal, I at least needed to have a room tonight. But how? I asked my question at the half-empty wineglass, and saw a refracted face resembling a red vibrating squid, ready with an answer. Looking up and to the left, I found the refraction's keeper, an ample, beautiful woman sitting in the corner. She looked so distracted I almost died. The rude waiter pressed me for a menu option. "Come on, will it be crab nog, eggs, fish bread?" Staring straight ahead, I answered. "Lady," he said. "Oh dear oh my, the newest titillator of the inn, a Miss Bryody, has caught your attention. Forget about it, you turnip. You're shit out of luck in that regard, and you're a sad plonker. She told me she doesn't date." The waiter waltzed off laughing, but I was adamant, venturing over to conversate. I must have orbited her hair for a lifetime before she looked up and asked, "Well, what will it fucking be from you? Would you like to sniff at the tissue I used to wipe blood from my honker hole?" I said, "No, but I'd like to know what your heart smells like, if you'll allow me." She smiled. We ate and drank and talked for hours, words and wine dripping off each other like champagne bottles in a shower. Finally, I found the confidence inside to ask Bryody the big question. "Can you show me your slide collection upstairs?" Her eyes widened. "Hold the front door a little more fucking ajar, bossy. You're not doing anything likewise without giving me a ring first." "A ring?" I stammered. "Of course, your shininess. I've got a wee one in my back pocket." I sprinted to the toilet to brainstorm. This was an impossible mission. I didn't have a ring in my trinket sack. My nervousness demanded my pissing. I started. "Oh no, no loo paper." Panicked, I used the only available material to daub my dripping, the inner brown tube of the toilet roll. As I watched the tube soften into mud under my spurts, my fertile imagination quickened. Wee idea! I quickly softened the rest of the tube under a hot tap and watched it transform into molten brown clay, ample for forging into a finger donut. Half an hour later, I marched up to Bryody and stuck a brown clump on her fattest finger. "It's perfect!" she screamed. We ran upstairs like scared badgers and into her private quarters. The room was purple, with a bed, 2 wicker chairs and a coffee table. Immediately, she suggested we get to work on a jigsaw puzzle. At that point I would have agreed to a 5,000 piecer, if only to glimpse her girdle. Thankfully, she brought out a little 1,000 piecer from under her bed, and we sat about the coffee table to begin it. I was staring straight at her eyes, still trying to organise the jigsaw below me. It was barely in my bottom periphery, and yet I was continually matching pieces to other pieces. Even my knob quivered. I turned away to breathe and noticed something special about her bedpost. "Bryony, you seem to have a lot of notches on your bed there." "Oh, they're for every time I complete a puzzle," she joked, as she placed the final piece into place. I looked down. The jigsaw puzzle before me was a crude image of me with a bag full of gold pieces, standing next to the biggest moss I'd ever seen in my life. How? I looked up, and my Bryony had transformed into 100% moss. "Ah!" I yelped. The moss jumped at me, sending jigsaws flying, shouting, "I desire more trinkets! Feed me!" Suddenly the door burst open. It was the daft waiter. "Quick, grab me by the hand!" he shouted. He grabbed me by my bollocks, dragging me from the moss before tossing my bag of rubbish trinkets into her green mouthhole to temporarily quench her. Absorbing my dirty treasure, the moss coughed in repulsion, heaved and vomited out a whole hunk of riches. The riches I had lost that very morning. It was she, the bad moss. While the waiter attacked her, I quickly gathered my mega cachet into my pockets, sprinting down the mahogany steps and out into the silvery rain. What a mess. Sweating and letting the pitter-patter tickle my balding head, I smiled, gleefully trudging westwards to another village, to the marshes, between the meadows, along the skirting of the fields, towards the next golden trinket.